Scientists have Reddit. What is the most crazy concept that may actually be possible in the future? Story 1. In my field, there has been a lot of work towards rebuilding organs. Essentially, take a diseased organ of any kind, decellularize it, remove all the individual cells, and leave only the extracellular matrix scaffold. Repopulate with healthy stem cells, and let that scaffold direct the cells and rebuild that end stage kidney into a healthy kidney and get off dialysis. Or rebuild a heart riddled with heart disease. Maybe regrow an entire limb lost by a soldier or someone in a horrific accident. Quite a ways and a few Nobel Prizes from that. But a group in our field has already done this with a pig pancreas. And while it didn't last very long ultimately, it was an important first step. Story 2. Cultured meat, being able to grow meat from cells in a controlled environment so we won't need animals anymore. Scientists have managed to produce a burger in the lab, but it's currently too expensive for mass production, although this might become normal in 10 to 20 years. This has the potential to free up our depleting resources, that is, land, water, currently dedicated to meat production, and growing meat in such a setting could also resolve many foodborne illnesses. However, so far the technology would only be able to create minced meat and not slabs of meat, as that would require vascularization of the cells. Story 3. Flying like a bird on Titan. This isn't may actually be possible in the future. It's nearly possible right now. We almost have the technology to do it. We just need to get there. Titan, largest moon of Saturn, second largest moon in the solar system, 10th largest body in the solar system, has a dense atmosphere, 1.4 times Earth's atmospheric pressure, and a lower gravity, 0.14 ch. Earth is 1 g. So if you could get there right now, with a moderately better spacesuit and some crude relatively small wings, you could flap your arms and soar like a bird. Also, there are probably seas of hydrocarbons on the surface. And overall, Titan has more liquid hydrocarbons than all of the crude oil and natural gas on Earth, so that's cool. Story 4. Nuclear fusion. With the world continuously growing towards climate change, rising temperatures, melting ice caps, and smog hovering above cities, there we find a need for clean, powerful, and inexpensive energy. And the only completely clean and high-yielding energy without continuous maintenance is nuclear fusion. The only starting materials are hydrogen atoms, but the setback occurs at the requirement for temperatures over 2 million Fahrenheit and 1 million atms of pressure. No nuclear waste, or any waste at all. 4x, the energy output of nuclear fission, and cheap starting materials will save the energy crisis on Earth and remove fossil fuels from our electricity production altogether. Whichever country harnesses it first will rule the world. Story 5. We can fit a terabyte of data in the palm of our hand right now. Nanorobots, which can build anything given the raw materials and blueprints, including other nanorobots, are not so far-fetched. Medical technology may soon be able to incubate a human from conception to birth. We are getting much better at finding near-Earth-sized planets in our galaxy. Now imagine sending human DNA, self-replicating nanorobots, and the entirety of human knowledge on a smallest ship to an Earth-like planet. Once there, the nanorobots are programmed to rebuild civilization. If we find thousands of Earth-like planets and send ships to each of them, then we can almost guarantee success if the plan is solid. I call this blowing our load all over the Milky Way. Story 6. Astronomers here. If you ever thought Cloud City in Star Wars was awesome, it turns out we might be able to do something similar someday. On Venus. Sure, the surface sucks, but if you go about 50 kilometers up, Venus's atmosphere is the most Earth-like there is in the solar system. What's more, unlike the crushing pressure and hot temperatures on the surface, you have the same atmospheric pressure as on Earth, temps varying from 0 to 50 C, and pretty similar gravity to here. So yeah, floating cities in some form on Venus is actually not the dumbest thing. It's more appealing than Mars in some. So while I don't see it happening in my lifetime, it may well be a more serious plan in the future. Story 7. Epigenetics. A way too broad of a topic with too many unknowns at the moment. But think of it as software that runs the hardware that is our genes or DNA and allows organisms to adapt to environments as they change, or guides the repair of damage to the body. So in the future, imagine if we are able to just write epigenetic software programs for specific diseases/ailments/injuries or environments that tell our genes exactly which ones, more specifically, the proteins they produce and the function those proteins do, needs to be turned on-off and in what amounts to allow maximum adaptation or quick repair. Like in the Matrix, where they download a program to make you suddenly know something mentally. You could do the same for the body and allow it to know how to use its own hardware to fix or adapt to new environments, or to quickly fix diseases or damage. Story 8. Due to time dilation, if you travel at near enough to the speed of light, you can get anywhere you want in as little time as you want. The downside is that everyone else will have experienced much, much more time. So it may well be possible to explore the galaxy or even the universe, like the crew of the Enterprise do. But every time they revisit the same planet, they will find that civilizations have risen and fallen in the time it took them to get coffee from a nearby nebula. But I designed quantum computers, so I guess I should say that instead. In response to those who are more interested in quantum computers, they will be pretty awesome. I'm doing an r/science AMA on July 18th, so drop by and ask me stuff. I've also got an outreach project going on, if you are interested. Basically, normal computers break any problem down into lots of tiny bits of maths. Then, we enslave transistors to do those tiny bits of maths for us. We can also break problems down into different tiny bits of maths, which transistors can't do. To make computers to do these, we'll have to enslave quantum systems instead. Some problems that are really horrible, complicated for a transistor-type computer, are fairly simple for our quantum slaves. So things that would take us the age of the universe to solve now, quantum computers could do on our tea break, which is nice. Story 9. Full-on cybernetics like you often see in sci-fi. Right now, we can make rudimentary mechanical limbs that can respond to muscle contractions in the limb stump in order to move. But as the limbs lack any sort of tactile response, you cannot use them effectively without directly viewing them while you use it. We will likely someday be able to send data from the limb to the brain as opposed to just the other way around. Maybe even eventually having seamless robotic prosthetics that function as good as or even better than the real limb. Story 10. We will one day learn how to mimic a human brain on a computer and download a human consciousness onto it. It can then be given sensory inputs and physically exist as a machine. All of the fundamental building blocks are there already. Scientists have created simulated brains with about 1 to 2 million neurons. The human brain has about 100 billion. So we are a long way off, but we will get there. Now imagine this. It's very difficult to send a human to another star system. There are speed limits and problems like radiation and body deterioration. You then have to worry about the atmosphere and sources of food on exoplanets. But we can send androids, communication devices, solar panels, and 3D printers. So we send a single craft to another star system at incredible speeds. It will land on the nearest available rocky exoplanet. The androids, preloaded with a human consciousness, are powered on and begin working, setting up a manufacturing facility to gather raw materials and generate new machines and androids. A data store of thousands more minds are loaded onto the androids as they come online. Additional spacecraft are built to send to other star systems. We then beam data with high-powered lasers, providing a steady stream of new human minds, as well as improved technology schematics. Humans can now colonize the galaxy. Story 11. Fat loss with a pill or prescription. We all have brown fat tissues to varying degrees. Mostly we have it as babies, but it deactivates as we get older. Brown fat metabolizes stored body fat, yellow fat, directly into body heat, without having to be converted into sugars and consumed in muscle exertion. Chances are the skinny guy or girl, who never wears a coat when it's cold outside and can eat like a pig without gaining weight has a mutation where their brown fat is turned on all the time. Scientists are decoding the metabolic pathways that can turn on brown fat. Eventually, they will produce a drug that can turn on your brown fat. Sweat those extra pounds away. Story 12. Telepathy. Brain-computer interfaces are already starting to get usable. Simply put, the main concept consists of detecting brain signals and sending them to a computer. For instance, we can detect signals that your brain uses to tell your muscles to move a certain way, even if you're just thinking about it and not actively doing it, such as remembering to do something in the past. Given enough precision, we could theoretically tap on your brain signals controlling your vocal cords or other deep processes related to inner thoughts. This could allow a user to talk to a computer only by thinking. The computer could then parse the signal and do something with it. For instance, searching something on the internet and returning the answer via an auditory channel. This could be wired to anything a computer can do. Example, a smartphone or a robot controller. The applications of such technology are incredibly interesting. However, it's ethically improbable. You could easily think of thought snooping, hijacking, pretending to be someone else, flooding, etc. We are also pretty far to achieve something that complex as developing, testing, and marketing, BCIs, are extremely challenging, mostly because they are directly implanted in one's brain, as of now. Story 13. Using the moon as a slingshot for interplanetary travel to almost eliminate fuel costs. Space elevators on both the Earth-facing side and the far side of the moon are possible with current materials technology. The way this would work would be a large space station or asteroid base between the Earth and Moon, which is tethered to the Moon's surface. This would be very easy to reach from Earth orbit using conventional rockets or possibly by just being dropped from the top of a space elevator on Earth. Once on this space station, just travel down to the Moon's surface via the elevator, hop on a train to the other side of the Moon, and then ascend the elevator on the other side. This elevator is like a rope swung out of the Earth Moon system, the further you climb, the faster your velocity around the system gets. Climb far enough along it, and you'll get enough velocity that if you let go, you would escape the Earth. Moon system entirely. Time and position it, right? And you can put yourself on any escape trajectory you want, including out of the solar system altogether. Story 14. Advances in gene sequencing and splicing. When we talk about it, we usually discuss its application in areas like eliminating genetic diseases, which is a fantastic goal. It also could be used to genetically extend lifespan, as it has already been demonstrated in mice. But there is a darker side to this equation. If we are able to customize genetic structure, we would also be able to customize humans for specific roles. Imagine a world where some engineered humans are created for specific jobs. We could have a soldier class, enhanced to be stronger, acute eyesight and hearing to maximize their ability on a battlefield. You could have ones created smaller, needing less food, water, and wear, so they can be sent on long-range space exploration missions. You can have a genetically created worker that is maximized for any role or job we can come up with. The question will be, though, are they still human? Of course, they will still be us. We will engineer our descendants to live longer, healthier lives. They will be the upper class, the ones leading and making the decisions. However, we will now be living in a world where literally you are born into your role in society. Will such a world work? If an entire civilization is set up where every single individual has a role and is maximized to accomplish that role, they can achieve marvelous things. Or would literal classism cause fighting and destruction? Would desert be engineered out of the workers? Would free will still exist? Would we still be human? Story 15. Laser ablation. Without a doubt. When we think about interplanetary travel, there must be two different kinds of transport, one for soft human cargo and the other for supplies and such. The rocket for the humans has to limit inertia, while the cargo doesn't need to control these bone-shattering forces to such a degree. This means we can create two different kinds of rockets for the future, one for goods and the other for people. Laser ablation essentially uses a super high-powered laser on the planet's surface to ablate, disintegrate a substrate. When the substrate is disintegrated, the force from the reaction can be channeled into a nozzle and used to create thrust. This causes the rocket to quickly be shot up into the air, and with a controlled laser following the rocket, a significant amount of material can be ablated off of the rocket until it reaches orbit. When it reaches orbit, it is a matter of collecting the cargo and sending it to its next destination. This method of travel is considered to be the most cost-effective way to send material into space. All you need is a very strong rocket to protect from the atmospheric pressure, a nuclear reactor, and a super powerful laser. Two of these exist. It's just a matter of getting our lasers up to snuff. But this is the next important step, establishing a feasible working interstellar commerce, so we can mine the inhabitable planets around us to continue to feed civilization. Story 16. Okay, so CRISPR is a technology that relies on the cell's ability to repair DNA breaks, which can happen all the time and is not only normal, but is required for genetic recombination, hence why you are a real mixture of mom, dad, grandparents. We design what's called a guide, which is a 20 base pair sequence. that guides a protein called Cas9 to that 20 base pair sequence. It can be any sequence as long as there's an NGG site right next to it, and being any base. Cas9 will induce a break in the DNA, and the cells try to repair it. There are two ways this happens. Most commonly is that the DNA gets chewed back a little and then shoved back together like glue. This causes little deletions in your sequence. The other way is that the cell will use the information from the other DNA strand to fill in the missing gaps, homology-directed repair. This usually won't result in any mutation. However, we can also introduce a DNA strand that might have a mutation in the DNA, and the cell trying to repair the break will read our DNA strand and fix the break. But now the DNA has a mutation, and the cell is none the wiser. Cas9 is a naturally occurring protein in bacteria, but not in humans, so we don't have this editing happening all the time. The power lies in that we can literally make a mutation anywhere in the genome of our choice now, as long as that NGG is there. And using the homology DNA strand that we design, we can control the mutations that we make. An example of how this can work to treat patients is that at Columbia, scientists isolated stem cells from a patient with retinitis pigmentosa and edited the mutation back so that it's not mutant anymore. You can then reintroduce the cells back into the eye, and they will make normal retina cells. It seems to work with HIV as well, but since it's a virus, it can mutate in order to avoid being edited, which is what we are seeing. Story 17. It's looking increasingly likely that people under 40 will beat death. When people hear this, they often think, hey, there's no way we're 20 to 40 years away from curing death. And for the most part, they're right. What is not being accounted for is that within 20 years, we should see the average age of first world citizens reach up to around 150, and those citizens will feel and look 35 when they're 105. Death will certainly be cured by 2100, short of catastrophic humanity-altering events, and most people under 40 will live to see the year 2100, meaning they'll also likely see the year 3000, and so on. Look to the other answers in this thread to answer the questions of overpopulation and the problems that would occur from it. Story 18. One day we may all have implantable health monitors which are analyzing your blood 24/7. These monitors would look at the concentration of different molecules in your sweat could work as well for some molecules. The concentration of a panel of these could send an alert to your smartphone that you should go to the doctor because you may have a disease. The biomolecules monitored could be tailored to each person based on the risk of certain diseases, determined by environmental factors, familial history, and even your DNA sequence. This one isn't even that far off. I know many people working on technology, which we'll go into it in graduate school. Story 19. I'm no scientist, just a computer engineer. But if in the future we could read a snapshot of a living neuron and emulate it perfectly in software, including its connections and electrical state, then in a distant future, all the neurons and connections in a brain and crazy microchirurgia using nanobots, I don't see why you could not start transferring the neurons in its full state to a brain one by one. You copy a living brain neuron to its software simulation, and then the nanos install wireless transmitters on the connections of the old neuron, so it starts to communicate with the software neuron instead. You can discard the living neuron then. Then you do the same with the neighboring neurons, moving its state to the computer one by one when the wireless connectors are not needed because the living neuron connected to the soft neuron is also in software, the nanos can recycle them. At the end, you would have the full brain of a human on software. And since that's done neuron by neuron, I don't think it would be any continuity problem. In the sense that you just transfer the full brain state to another place and destroy the original, which, as the original human, I think, would definitely feel like dying, even if the copy feels as it has been transferred successfully. You would have to emulate the perception organs if the individual could go mad. But you would basically be software, live on the internet, or the ultranet, or whatever it's called by then, and be an immortal AI. And once you're not limited to the constraints of a biological brain, you could then start to improve and be ultra intelligent. Story 20, an end to employment, and even money. Money only exists to be used as a system to exchange goods and services among human beings. Although machines are still remarkably bad at coming up with creative solutions for today's problems, there's nothing to suggest that we could not replace all human labor with machines at some point in the future as AIs become superiorly creative. Further, 3D printers that deconstruct and recycle materials, even if they lost some percentage of materials in the process, might be able to provide an endless supply of goods just by having us imagine an object, throw our trash into the printer, and then the printer deconstructing the trash and printing out something new. Though this concept of machines taking our manufacturing and service jobs has been explored ad nauseum, the idea that this would necessarily lead to a diminished need for money is rarely explored. Although powering such a system might be quite a task with today's technology, it's not impossible to imagine a system where machines become more energy efficient than human beings and find ways to provide everything we could possibly need off of the energy systems we, or they, have already put into place. If we could have all of that, who, other than maybe the Ferengi, would even have a need for money? Story 21. I work in IT at a university, and just a few buildings over from me, a buddy of mine is working on creating a new kind of satellite that will be small and cheap enough that they can be mass produced and sent up to gather data from different points in space at once. Or, from a different perspective, they'll be cheap enough that a high school physics class could put one together, send it up into space, and get data from outside our atmosphere, all without costing an arm and a leg. This could be a thing in just a few years. This will also be one piece of the puzzle for a project that will eventually send an unmanned spacecraft outside of our solar system. The goal is to achieve speeds of about 15% of the speed of light, or about 100 million miles per hour, and reach Alpha Centauri, the closest star outside of our solar system, in about 20 years. Right now, they have every reason to believe that we will send spacecraft to another star within our lifetimes. Story 22, a brain-computer interface. Basically controlling a computer purely with brainwaves. People with extreme physical disabilities can type and communicate using this. It already works pretty well with a normal EEG cap, but in severe cases they can put sensors directly on the brain with surgery. This isn't a mind-reading device. It should be seen more as a tool, like a keyboard. It also uses machine learning to get better at interpreting a person's brain signals. Simultaneously, the brain adapts to using the interface as well. Brain and machine work together to understand each other. I've seen people play WoW using this technique, though he didn't achieve much more than walking around. Imagine the possibilities of the future when you combine this with VR. Story 23. Physical chemist here. The versatility and importance of high-temperature superconductivity cannot be overstated. We're definitely not anywhere near room temperature, but we're getting closer and closer to energy transfer with zero resistance at what we could call reasonable temperatures. When that's possible, and affordable, which could take longer, a whole new world of electromagnetic technology opens up to us. New applications in maglev tech, efficient power transmission, and even simple electric motors would become available to us. I'd say the most pressing of the three would be power transmission. When we can transfer electrical energy with no resistance, it removes a ton of the waste of moving power from one area to another. We actually lose around 65% of the energy from the plant during transfer and could revolutionize power consumption in areas around the world.